Hi, welcome to a short video about discussion board posts, both primary and peer responses. I always get great questions about these, and there's really a lot of wiggle room in how we are looking at them. So I wanted to give you some insights, but also encourage you to explore them as you see fit. To kind of give you a gauge of where we're going today, we're looking at the why and what for primary discussion board posts, the why and what for peer discussion board posts, and then where to find requirements, because sometimes they're there and sometimes they're not. So we're going to look for exactly what they look like and how to find them. And then an encouragement to go ahead in there and look at grading feedback, because often as not, that'll tell you how you're doing, not just by the number that you get for an assignment, but by the feedback itself on how you are accomplishing each part of the assignment. So for our primary posts, our aim in having these is to create discussion, just the same as an in-class discussion for a brick and mortar university or classroom. We as you know, by going into those spaces, everyone's not always ready. So I love that part about discussion boards, because I think it gives us the opportunity to be ready. We don't all have to be ready to have an in-person discussion on, Thursday morning at 9. We can go in as we are able from Tuesday when the course starts, or when that week starts on Wednesday, all the way through to the next Tuesday. And that gives us a chance to explore the content. We are looking to take that information that we're reading, listening to, and watching, and then we're going to seek to apply it. So what exactly are we doing to make all of that happen? Well, if you look up the idea of a short answer response, or check out these links below, so I'm sending you to the Purdue OWL, some YouTube videos, and a Prezi that covered these ideas. What we're essentially doing is figuring out a format or method to share about the topic, to share our response to the questions, and to share how we perceive the ideas. So we want to maybe address how we could use the information. Maybe we want to encourage discussion or conversation. If you look at short answer responses, we're generally looking at a paragraph format. So if you're familiar with a 5-paragraph essay, that same information is useful here. We're just squishing it into a paragraph. So think about it as a 5-sentence paragraph. In our first sentence, we're going to maybe restate the question. We're going to talk about what the idea is, and then in the middle 3 sentences, we're going to respond. What do we see? What do we feel? What are we experiencing? And then we're going to conclude by wrapping that up and hopefully encouraging further discussion points. And I'll cover a few more examples of sort of how to look at this in a moment. Our peer responses are, again, not discussion. We don't want to just share information. We want to say, well, I looked at this information and I approached it from my specific angle. But what about other people? Did they see it exactly as I did, which is always really fun? Or did they see something completely different, which is also really exciting? Oops, and we'll fix that spelling while we're here. But the aim there is, again, to have a discussion. The same way that you go into an assignment and you don't necessarily know which direction to take it, and you are reviewing materials and you are assessing and processing and then engaging with that material, so is everyone else. And so it's really exciting to go in and say, oh, look, other people had the same idea, which is super fun, but also other people maybe saw an angle that I didn't. And from that, the hope is that we grow and learn about the material. Sometimes it's really easy. We immediately think of something to say. Woohoo, you don't need me. Go for it. You've got it. Just respond as you see fit. But sometimes it can feel like, well, I'm tired. I don't really know what to say. So having a strategy for those times is a really good plan. In teacher speak, we often do discussions as PQP, which is praise, question, polish. Well, you don't really have to encourage your peers to polish their work. That's my job. But what about the praise and question parts? What if you can connect to a point in that other person's work and share what you found interesting, exciting, useful? What if you can encourage their growth? What if you can ask a question? Maybe you'd like to know a little bit more about how they've expressed themselves. Maybe you could share an example that works for you. So you could say, well, I think you're saying, and so I'm perceiving it in this way. Is that true? Is that what you're seeing? Is my example accurate? Maybe you can ask for more details. Ask a follow-up question. Considering ideas like praise and question are a great way to just have a strategy in your back pocket for the times when you don't immediately think of something. So how much are we doing here? What is that really looking like? Well, sometimes an assignment criteria is going to give us a framework. So it may give us a number or a number range of words to use. But again, that's a suggestion. The reason we give you a word count is because we don't want you to spend too much or too little time on it. And that number is encouraging you to find the middle space of just enough time. We don't want to go into it and say, well, write 3,000 pages on this. We realize that we have maybe a week or two and that we want you to focus within that time frame. But we also don't want you to just skip over it because we are sharing information that we hope that you will learn and grow from. So look at those ideas for numbers as a range, as an option, as a way to encourage you. If you're like me and you are wordy, you may go to the highest number or a little over. If you are straightforward and clear and give very concise examples, then you're going to be at the lower end of those numbers. Either one is great. It's about finding your voice within that. But the other place to look is the content and grading criteria. As you explore the questions in the assignment, remember that your goal is to share your response. You're sharing what you see, what you're thinking about, and how you're processing that material. That's individual. It's going to look a little different for each person. And again, consider that short answer response formula. Restate the question, respond to the question, and sum it up. It's a great way to get those 3-sentence sandwiches in there. We want to bring up the point we're addressing. So often as not, we have a couple of different questions. It's a great idea to say, well, I'm addressing this question. And then we respond with how we are viewing it or what we think should happen. And then we sum up with, what do you think about these ideas? Would you follow this advice or would you do something else? Thinking of it as that 3-sentence sandwich or as a short paragraph is a great way to fill up that space with good content and not just sort of words. And as you finish your response, consider heading over to that review to review the grading criteria. Pre-grade your own work. Do you feel you completed the assignment? So I'm going to skip over to that really quick because we usually have these grading criteria, and it will give a description and how many points it's worth, and then at the end it'll say how much. So for example, this is from one course where it's worth 75 points for that discussion board. This is from UNIV104 and it's worth 40 points overall. And so as you look at it, ask yourself, did I talk about this idea? How did I sum that up well? Did I talk about this idea? Did I talk about that idea? And you yourself can go through and check this out and see if you've missed anything. So often as not, the other part of that is that a student will miss something. So look at this grading criteria feedback because, especially for people like me, I'm going to go in there and say, hey, guess what? You missed this. You didn't provide 2 peer responses. Or, hey, you didn't mention this idea. Could you go back and add that? So look for those kinds of supports as well where maybe you're missing the points and it's because you skipped that question and you can go back and add it. Don't see your discussion board as sort of a final thing. Well, I posted once, it's over, it's done. Look at it as a conversation. And the other part of this is that if you fill this out for yourself and you say, okay, well, I think, I'd give myself 19 here. I think I'd give myself 20 here. I think I did a great job on this. Well, that lets you have a point of conversation for when your instructor fills out the same grading criteria. It lets you say, okay, well, I gave myself a 19 and they gave me a 20. I gave myself a 20, but they gave me an 18. What's going on? What kind of discussion could we have about this? And of course, I fill in between each of these with what I feel you are doing or with further content and support and engagement. So look for these for every instructor. They're going to look a little different, but they are always going to use that grading criteria, which is on your assignment. So to head back to the assignment, how do we find those numbers? Sometimes they're going to give us, when we go to an assignment, it's going to have this little box and it's going to say, this is the type of assignment, this is the due date, and here is the word count. Sometimes, though, it's going to give us a range, like 300 to 500 words. Or let's skip over. What about when it doesn't? It says see assignment details. There are no numbers. However, here at the bottom it says, please note that this assignment is graded on completion. By completing the items detailed in the grading criteria, so see how it's part of that assignment, you will earn full credit. So there are two places to look. One, right here in our assignment overview, it may give you a range or a number, and two, it may simply suggest an idea. And to go back to those numbers, over here in the assignment criteria, it says when you respond to your peers, consider about 100 words. But again, that is one course, and the other course just says, hey, complete this, talk to that person. So it depends on what we're getting out of that course, it depends on what our aims are, but there are two locations that you can look for. And again, look for them as a guide. What kind of praise or question can you offer in 100 words? What would a conversation look like? Would we want to say, good job, thanks? Or would we want to say, that was a great way to describe that particular motivation? I really felt connected to how you are motivated by your family, and I felt connected to your goal of having a better job and a more stable financial environment upon graduation. I too want the same thing. Or I was thinking about, my own needs, and putting those in a different category than my family. Look at how you can make those connections. But go look at those examples for things like short answer responses and consider having a strategy for when you are connecting to peers. Not that you necessarily need all of these every single time, but it's nice to have something in your back pocket for when you are tired or when you are just looking at it going, I don't know what to do this time. There are plenty of times this happens to me. As you can see on discussion boards, I am active. And there are times when I just feel empty and I don't really know what to say. And that is when I pull out my strategies and I praise and I ask questions and I encourage. So look for what works for you and find and keep your own strategy. Have fun out there.